Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspiration. If you've ever wanted a second chance at life, to be on fire, in passion, excited about what you're doing, or at least turn your life in a new direction, then do we have the Life Reimagined show for you. Today I'll be talking with Barbara Bradley Hagerty, award-winning journalist, 20-year correspondent for NPR, and the New York Times bestselling author of Fingerprints of God, and a book I found dumbfoundingly inspirational and motivational, Life Reimagined. It's a book I'll be recommending to my friends, family, parents, and yes, even my wife, Jessica. So today we'll talk about a life reimagined, about shifting your life, whether you're in middle age, golden age, or even getting started from version 1.0 to 2.0, or in my case, 3.0 and above. That plus we'll talk about the Stampede, the Pokey White Pony, Fareed Zakaria GPS, hookups, rain, and RVs, what quantum mechanics and the Heisenberg uncertainty principle has to do with mom, the bunny hop criterion, who has social security number 111111111, and what the hee-hee, ha-ha, and ho-ho center, oh my God, has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Barb. Are you ready to shine?
I am ready to shine and laugh.
Woohoo! Well, not requirements, but I think we'll get them both covered here today. All right, we had such a great conversation before we dove into things. We're just going to continue this. I've got to ask, how's the cycling going this year?
Oh, thank you for asking. I am hooked. I'm completely hooked. I'm getting a little braver, and I have a friend whom I wrote about a little bit in the book named Mary Breed, who started cycling about 4 years ago and has now 2 years won the national championship for her age bracket. She's between, she's in the 35 to 39 age bracket. She's unbelievably fast, and she has started, I don't know why, but she's kind of taken a little bit of an interest in me, and she's now dragging me down to do these intervals, and I just started yesterday with these wicked fast people. And so yesterday I'm finding myself, I couldn't believe it. I don't even know how to draft practically. I'm a little shy about getting right behind the wheel, but I found myself going like 24, 25, 26, 27 miles an hour behind these guys. And, I'm 56. I shouldn't be doing this.
You're going to win national.
But now I want to
win.
I mean, I'm looking at next year's national senior games, and I'll be 57, and maybe if I train really hard, I can equip myself well.
So this kind of shortcuts the whole book, but you did nationals, and I'm just dumbfounded. I'm going, she doesn't really have the draft down yet. And you did phenomenally well. It was like, I just started having fun in the turns. There was 112 of them, but it wasn't so bad. I'm like, jaws hitting the floor at how well you did without that foundation.
I really scared some of the other women in the race because I'd say, wow, I'm drafting. Like, this is the first time I've ridden in a group, and I noticed that they were kind of riding away from me, trying to get as far away from me as they could. But, I think I have a lot of will, but I don't have a lot of skill. And so I think this next year, if I just learn a few skills, and try to have fun. I mean, Michael, this has given me really a second lease on life. It really has. Especially, this, that when you're doing something that's as solitary, for example, as writing a book, and you do interviews, but I assume you're working out of your home or somewhere that isn't, you're not in a bustling crowd all the time. You need like these little goals. When you're writing a book, your goal is to finish the book in a year. But you need little tiny goals where you say, okay, today I'm going to do intervals. Today I'm going to ride a 50-mile ride. Today I'm going to see if I can keep up with Mary. All of that. And it gave me these small little punctuation marks in my life. And it was enormous fun. I mean, it is so much fun. It gives me reason to get up in the morning. I have many reasons to get up in the morning, but this is a really particularly fun one.
Woohoo! I love it. We're on similar paths because, and I never thought about it till you were saying it right now. But my highlight of my day and my week is going out on my runs with my wife, and now both she's come back from illness, and so she's running well, and I'm working on my comeback, and so I'm sort of able to keep up with her. But like yesterday was the fast run, and I was just so charged to try to keep up with her. I didn't tell her I'm going to try to keep up with you today, but I was so charged to try to keep up. And then Saturdays are like probably a long bike ride for you on the weekends are our epic runs. And I am so excited. That's my out time. That's my, just like you're describing, there's that micro goal of what are we going to do today? This is going to be so much fun. So let's go back from here, and let's if we could put ourselves back into a time capsule, because your life really has been reimagined. And when you start this book, you have no idea how much that's going to be the case. Can you take us back? Would you mind taking us back to September 5th, 2012?
September 5th, 2012. Yeah, that was an interesting day. So I was a reporter for National Public Radio, and the day before I'd done a story that a listener was really, really upset about, and which happens all the time. But I had to respond to him and hope that we weren't going to get sued, and I did nothing wrong. But, you have to respond to the listeners when they're really upset. Mm-hmm. But I was composing this email to him, explaining why I'd done the story the way I had. And suddenly I felt this kind of, my heart began to beat really fast, and I grew really out of breath, and I felt this heat radiating up my back, and I just felt like really faint. And so what did I do? Naturally, I Googled heart attack women, right? And
wise.
Of course, right? And so I realized that I was kind of perhaps having the symptoms of a heart attack. And I wasn't that old. I was, 51 or something like that, 53. And so I called up my doctor and I explained what was going on. And he said, I want you to get to the hospital right away. And as he was talking to me, I fainted. I said, I can do that. And then I fainted. And the next thing I know, the ambulance is there. Scott Simon from NPR, who is the same doctor, is like leading the ambulance guys up to my cubicle. And I'm in the hospital. And by the time I got there, I felt fine, just absolutely fine. It was probably something to do with stress. I don't know what it was to do with, but they kept me overnight, mm-hmm. and it was kind of like Hotel California. You can come, but you can never go. And I just could not seem to get out of the hospital. And around 5 a.m, my husband was coming down to see me, and he called, and he said, you need to talk to David. And my brother. And I said, well, why? And he said, I just think you need to talk to him. And immediately I knew what had happened. I just sensed that my dad had died while I was in the hospital. I just had this sense of that. And so I called my brother, and sure enough, my dad had just died. And he was older. He was 91. He, had lived a good life. He had dementia the last few years, but, he had a really good life. But what hit me, Michael, was that this was like a crossroads for me, because I had kind of tasted a little bit of a real fear about a serious health scare. Mm-hmm. Turns out there was really nothing wrong with me. We don't know what was wrong with me, but a serious health scare. And then my dad died, and that kind of created this recognition that Davidson, my brothers of my generation, was the next to go, right? We didn't have an infinite amount of time. And if I was going to have a second chapter of my life, I really needed to think about doing it now. I needed to start building the edifice now for a reimagined life. And that was a turning point for me.
Thank you for sharing on that. Have you looked at, I was talking with Jessica about this at breakfast this morning, and she goes, well, what happened and what caused it? And I said that I thought, and this is my own bias, my own filter system, that your higher self was giving you a wake-up call.
I absolutely believe that's the case. Someone said something to me that I found was really, really interesting. He said, if you are in a job that's not quite right for you, mm-hmm. In terms of your personality, your style, or whatever, and broadcast news is very, very high. It's a very high-stress job. You have no control of your life. It's difficult for me. Some people love that stuff. For me, it's very, very difficult. So this person said, if you are in a job that's not quite right for you, one of two things is going to happen. Mm-hmm. Either you will leave your job, or your body will force you to leave your job. And I had been contemplating making a shift for several years. In fact, my first book, Life Reimagined, my first book was Fingerprints of God. I actually wrote that book to create an off-ramp for myself to get out of daily news if I wanted to do that. So I had been thinking for several years about leaving, but what this did is it just encapsulated, you know what, this is really the time I need to do it. My body is telling me, my psyche is telling me, it is time for you to make a change, Barb, a change for the better. It's scary, but you got to do it.
How much had your mom's, I guess she had a stroke about a year earlier. How much was that in your psyche?
It was, that was very, what mom did was.
And your mom is cool, by the way.
Oh, my mom is very, very cool. She's 90, she'll be 95 in August, and, and she's sharp as a tack. So here's the thing about my mom. She and I were really, really close friends, and I would talk to her every day, at least once a day. And what happened is one day, she just wasn't herself when I talked to her in the morning. And my brother, who talks to her at night, said, yeah, there's something wrong with Mom. So we went over there. Turned out Mom had had a stroke. We took her to the ER. We didn't know that, but we took her to the ER, and they immediately discovered that. She almost immediately, once she got to the ER, fell unconscious. And we weren't sure that she would ever speak again. We weren't sure she'd recover. We didn't know, what would happen to Mom. Would she, and for me it was a particular tragedy because one of Mom's great gifts is her ability to kind of take a reading of a situation, figure out the best way to go, the moral high ground, the whatever it is. I could come to her with my problems, and she would help me figure things out. And here I was afraid that she would never even speak again, much less give me, guidance and things like that. And so when she, she had her stroke, it was another wake up call for me. And I remember going home after a few days in the ICU, and I was with my husband, and we were one of those rare occasions where we were actually cooking dinner. I'm a really bad cook. So we were cooking dinner. It was a beautiful day right before Memorial Day, my favorite time of year. And I looked outside, and it's like when I'm always bursting with energy and joy. And I looked outside as we're, cooking dinner through the window, and I said, I feel nothing. And I looked at my husband and I said, I think I'm having a midlife crisis. And Devin put down the tomato and looked at me and he goes, don't do that.
Oh, no.
Don't have a midlife crisis. That's all we need, right? And so actually this was a huge part of the story because I next morning I got up really early the next day and I went on the internet and looked up midlife crisis because I wondered, am I having a midlife crisis? Is this what I'm going through? Is it inevitable? How do I get through it? How do I thrive at midlife? And these were the questions that really drove the book. How do you thrive at midlife? Because I really, obviously there's a lot of people who are my age or older or in my cohort, midlife. And they're wondering the same things, but they're afraid to ask the questions because, you don't want to admit that you're having second thoughts about your job or whatever it is. And so I thought, well, you know what? This is my opportunity to kind of go out, find the answers, and give them to people who don't have the time to do the research.
I love that. And we were talking off air, and I should ask you what the range of midlife is, but what I'm thinking now is with millennials coming along is that their job, their job expectancy,
yes,
it's right, shorter and shorter and is more compressed.
Yes.
So they are having to reinvent themselves
Absolutely.
Time and time again. So I'd argue that what we're looking at, Life Reimagined, is for every generation now.
Yeah, they really have a much more uncertain future than I did when I graduated in 1981 and just, from college and just was able to get a job and in journalism and work my way up. They have a much, much harder time. So midlife is it used to be 40 to 60, and baby boomers are so much healthier that it's more like 45 to 65 because you talk to a 60-year-old and they don't say, oh, next year I'll be old. Oh, when I'm 61, I'm old. No, they'll say, I'm midlife, I feel good, all of that. But I think your point about millennials is really right. They have a very uncertain future. And so it's not that they won't have jobs, it's just there isn't the job security. And so they have to really think about their lives in the way that I now think about mine, which is, what do I have to offer? How can I'm a little company all by myself. You're a little company all by yourself. Mm-hmm. What do we have to offer? Not how can we be part of a larger organization, although that's great too if you can do it. But what are the skills, what are the talents, the passions, the experiences that I have to offer? And millennials are having to develop those skills much earlier than the rest of us did.
It's fascinating, and it makes me think, and I'm 45, I'll be 46 this summer, so I fit into the target category there. Yes, barely. I'm sneaking in, and I want to stay on the sneak in side as long as I can, of course. But it's got me thinking, oh, where did I want to go with this? Hold on one second here. Wow. I hear you. Maybe I'm more in there than I thought.
No, you just have too many ideas swirling around in your head. That's the problem. They're all competing.
What I'm thinking about is we're all needing to reinvent ourselves now. And when you said, here's what it was. When you said we're all kind of our own units now.
Yeah.
What it got me thinking is, wow, that's really scary if I have to be an island. And then I jumped all the way forward towards the end of the book, which is, and it's a theme that runs through this book, which is the more that you find a way to help others.
Yes.
Not Absolutely. Only are you not an island, but you shine. That's a greater judge of happiness than happiness.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was the one thing that I found over and over again is that you really have to choose kind of meaning and purpose over short-term happiness. Because if you choose meaning and purpose, and by that, I mean, a lot of things are involved in that, but one of the main things that's involved is a purpose larger than yourself, where you are giving away, your talents, your time, whatever it is. In a way, I think, you're giving yourself to something larger than yourself, outside of yourself. It can be down a generation. For me, I don't have my own children, but I have a stepdaughter who's great. I have researchers, young journalists that I mentor. It could be that way. It could be doing volunteering activity. Whatever it is, as long as you are giving of yourself, then you're going to be much, much happier in the long term, and you're going to be healthier as well. And, I want to I make a distinction that I think is right, and people have to judge for themselves, but I make a distinction between volunteering per se and pro bono. And the distinction I make is that with volunteering, I volunteered by taking my dog to the hospital every other week and visiting patients. And that was great, but it didn't particularly call on my skill set, which might be things more like, interviewing, writing, hearing people's stories, getting them to talk about themselves, whatever it might be. Pro bono is using your particular skill set that you've developed over the years, your passions and all of that, actually to help in a larger cause. And so I think if you can find a way that sweet spot where you're not only giving away, but you're giving away something that you uniquely have to offer, that you've developed for yourself, that's really kind of perfect.
And it makes sense because when you brought, if I ever name right, Sandra, when you brought
Sandra Day
to the hospital, Social Security number 111111111. When you brought her to the hospital, and you literally got blood test on this, your oxytocin levels go up. But I bet if we did a brain scan, did like a PET scan, it's not really firing your hippocampus the way something that challenges you to use the skills that you have does.
Right. That's absolutely right. I mean, things like, for example, sometimes I help doing emceeing, or I'll do an interview on stage, or even, to tell you the truth, even kind of speaking or doing workshops or things like that. That is a use of my research, but also my talents or my passions to help for big ideas, right? I have a passion about making people care about ideas. And if I can do that, if I can do it in speaking engagements or just mentoring someone or whatever it might be, I am sure you will see my brain light up in many more ways than when I'm going from patient to patient in the hospital. It's not that I don't like patients. I do, and I love engaging them in conversation, but it's not really what I'm great at.
Do you think, I'm thinking of a personal bias here, my dad who retired last year, and he's been an attorney for, 30, 40, 45 years, I guess. And I'm saying what we could do to help you. He's very happy. He's got happiness on his side. He's got that upside of the U, and I want to talk about that next. But I really want to get his brain firing more. And he's going, well, I've been around the block at a time or two. My skill set isn't needed now. It's a whole new generation. And I'm thinking that's the reverse.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. His skill set is absolutely needed, but not only his skill set, his wisdom. The fact that he's been around the block a few times means that he understands pitfalls. He can look at a document or a case or whatever it might be. He can look at it and go, you know what, we need to do this and not that. We need to watch out for this. We need to file these papers. He's been around the block. It's why you want, for example, a 55-year-old surgeon and not a 35-year-old surgeon, because the 55-year-old has seen it all before. And when stuff goes wrong in the operating room, you want the 55-year-old to go, you know what? Okay, we do this, and fix you up.
I've got chills because my last surgery, I always used to say, I want the young guy who uses the latest, greatest techniques. Right. And I have chills because I read it in this book, and I know who the surgeon was that saved my life the last time around. It was not the young guy, and thank God, because it was the most complicated operation.
Absolutely. I know. It's so, we think that we think, wisdom, no one really cares about wisdom. They actually do. It's actually a value in and of itself because there's pattern recognition, there's emotional intelligence. All of this is developed. You know how to navigate the workplace, how to navigate the legal system, the operating room. All of this stuff takes time. You don't just get it. You're not born with it. It takes time. And we, who are older, I'm 56, we who are older just take it for granted. But you know what? No, a young person actually really wants my guidance. They do, because I've seen it before. If I haven't seen this exact same thing that they're going through, if I'm not dealing with kind of social media issues that they may go through, I've dealt with hate mail from from listeners of NPR. I know how to navigate that. It may not be the exact same circumstances, but it's in the same kind of zip code.
It's if we were to try to put I don't want to call it a cold and callous term, but to use more of a technical term, you have one heck of a map. You have a mind map that is much, it's filled in a lot more.
That's right. I have a mind map, and anyone who's my age has one of these. I mean, if you've devoted yourself to developing any kind of expertise and you've lived, you're going to have both an emotional and a kind of technical or vocational mind map. You'll understand things, and that's invaluable. And millennials want it, and they want the encouragement. I mean, I think about the people who encouraged me when I was a young reporter. I will never forget those people. Those people, maybe they didn't type as quickly as I did because I grew up learning how to type. But you know what? They really understood the human condition. They understood character, how to tell a story, the narrative arc. They understood this stuff. They understood when there were holes in my story. You need to go back here. You need to talk to this kind of person. They mentored me, and I will never forget them. And so we can do the same thing.
I love it. And to add one more thing, which kind of jumps forward again in your book, we're still going to this U, and I'm kind of skirting around the U, which we'll get to. But when people get happier in their later years, one of the reasons is that you talk about the amygdala, the lizard-like part of our brain, our fight or flight response kind of goes quiet to danger, and it kicks on for the happiness. And if we have a mentor that can help keep us from freaking out at everything that happens, that's huge.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. They have perspective. I mean, I've gone to my mentors, and young reporters have come to me, just, I've gone to them in tears. And I remember one in particular, and, he was like, this is not the end of the world. Look, we just fix this. Let's have some perspective here. He had the wisdom, the time to develop perspective. And so he was on the kind of upside of the U curve of happiness, and thank goodness. I mean, isn't that great news? Because you know what I love about this book? Like, or what I love about, not this book, I don't mean that. What I love about the research.
Oh, and you can love your book.
Well, yeah, I feel a little awkward saying that. But what was really encouraging about doing the research is being a journalist. I'm very realistic about things. And so I didn't want to kind of write a book that said, oh, golly jeepers, midlife is just the time when everything's happy and all the roses are coming up and it's fresh and new and blah, blah, blah. No, you know what? Midlife is a really complicated time, and I wanted to acknowledge that. I mean, we have a lot of responsibilities. Generally by the time you finish midlife, one or both parents have died. Some of your friends have gotten cancer. You've had health scares. Maybe you've lost a job. I mean, stuff happens in midlife, right? It's not the easy ascent of youth. But what was really, so I wanted to acknowledge that and say this is a complicated time. And in fact, what's interesting is that economists who have been doing these surveys for 20 years in 75 different countries all find that there is this U curve of happiness where people are really happy in their 20s and 30s, and then stuff gets harder in your 40s, and you hit a nadir at 45 in the United States. You're like your unhappiest, your unhappiest moment, Michael.
If this is my unhappiness, I'm woohoo. But and then beginning in your early 50s, you have this kind of lull, this dip of happiness, and then beginning in your early 50s, for a bunch of reasons, people tend to get happier. They get happier for for brain reasons. Our brains begin to process good news and discount bad news or disattend to. It's not like we're unaware of it. It's just like we have perspective on it, right? And so we begin to kind of disattend and not focus so much on the bad news, and we begin to focus really well on the good news and those things that are important to us, like relationships and causes. Those become important, and we begin to move up this U curve of happiness so that someone, in his mid-70s is happier than when he was 45. Right? Mm-hmm. Part of it is his brain. Part of it is the responsibilities have probably eased a little bit. You're not, midlife is a time when everyone's dumping, wheelbarrows full of responsibilities on you. And some of that begins to ease up, and you get a sense of perspective. And it just gets better and better. I'm wondering, I was thinking about my wife again, and now we're back in the kids discussion since we're both healthy, and we're getting excited about this, and I was like, well, I wonder if we can shift your curve, or if we can actually overlap the happy parts, because we extend it out, and that's a lot of what you're talking about in this book.
Right. I actually think that there are things, I think having kids a little bit later will keep you younger for longer. Woo-hoo. Kids just do that. Yeah. I mean, my stepdaughter is living with us right now, and I cannot tell you the joy and the energy that it brings us, and we're dreading it. She's moving out in a couple of weeks, and we're dreading it. Yeah, we're going to have to stay young. We'll keep inviting her and her boyfriend over for dinner and, mm-hmm. All of that. But, investing down generationally keeps you young. Having kids later will keep you young longer. But I also think, Michael, that there are things that really happy people do. When I was writing the book, NPR sent out a call out on its Facebook page, and it basically said, how's midlife treating you? If you're between 40 and 65, just tell us, what are the ups, downs, how's it going for you? And literally, in 2 hours, I got 700 emails. They were just beautiful little masterpieces of how people deal with midlife. And it was every range of stuff. Bad stuff had happened. Woman wakes up and her husband, who's 45, has passed on, right? Things, shocking things. And yet what I saw is there were certain patterns, there were certain things that really happy people did at midlife. And we do it naturally, but it's kind of nice to know that what they do, because it helps me. What happy people do at midlife is they shift what they focus on from their goals and dreams and aspirations, which may or may not have been realistic, to the things that are in control of their life. And that's generally people and causes that are important to them. So, when you're in your early 30s, maybe you think, well, I will be the CEO of that company, or I will win a Pulitzer Prize, or maybe I can still do professional baseball, or whatever it is. And then as you get a little older, you realize, you know what, I may not be CEO, or I may not win a Pulitzer, or whatever it is. And I'm certainly not going to be a pitcher for the Nats, right, when you hit your 40s. But what people do is they reconcile, and this is part of the midlife dip, realizing, oh, you know, those dreams may not happen. But the happy people, what they do is they look at those dreams and they go, you know what? Let me look at my life and look at how it's turned out. Let me look at the things that I do have, not the stuff I don't have, not the fact that I'm not CEO, but let's look at the fact that I have a really great daughter. I have really great friends. I have my health. My mom is still alive. I have a wonderful husband. I have, you know, wonderful opportunities. I have a group of friends that I really, really enjoy. Let's look at those things that are really important and pivot on that and actually focus on those things. And that's what happy people do. That's how people get through midlife happily. They focus on what they can control, relationships that matter to them, and causes that matter to them.
I think one of the things that I like most about your book is, and this is coming from a male perspective, where this isn't just a male phenomenon, but we can get isolated in our own little islands and forget the importance of our friends. And that's one of the things that's emphasized time after time in here.
You know, there were a couple of surprises for me in doing the research, and one was the importance. It sounds kind of trivial, but the importance of having, quote, a little purpose, so hobbies, biking, guitar, learning Spanish, whatever. But the other really crucial thing is friendships. In fact, it turns out that there's not a huge amount of research on this, but you know, there are dozens of studies, but it's not like research on marriage or whatever. But what researchers have found is that friends are actually more important to your health than family.
That was a surprising one.
Isn't that shocking? But it makes sense in a way, because you can't control who's in your family. So you may have married the most wonderful person, but if you don't get along with his or her parents or the cousins or whatever, or whatever, that decreases your health and your happiness. Whereas the friends, you choose your friends. And if a friendship is really, really troubling and really harming your health, then you have the option to kind of walk away, which sounds really cruel. But sometimes you need to kind of at least create distance for your own health's sake. I mean, I found that if someone is really sapping all of my time and energy, I need to create a distance and help them a little bit more from afar to just get my breath back, right? But you can do that with friends, and you can't do it really with family. And so friends, I mean, people who have friendships, close friendships, they are much less likely to, have a stroke or a heart attack. They're more likely to live longer. They'll keep their memory longer. I mean, study after study just shows the importance of friendships. It's truly astonishing.
What's fascinating to me is it's more important, it seems, than diet, than controlling your cholesterol level, potentially either whether you're a cigarette smoker or not, right, whether you've got somebody that has your back.
Right. And it's interesting because I went down to UVA and did this experiment with the kind of kind generosity of a researcher there named James Cohn at UVA. And basically what we did is, I'll just very briefly explain it. I brought down a really close friend with me, and we did 3 experiments.
This is when you got shocked. All in the name of the book and research.
Really, exactly. The links I went through for my readers.
And they were laughing. They were laughing from what I understand.
Yeah, right. They were, oh my gosh, yes. The people in the other room they thought it was hysterical. But basically what they did, they put me in a brain scanner, and what they wanted to see is there were kind of 2 conditions. One is when I would look up and I'd see a 0 in the screen, that meant that I was not going to get an electric shock.
Life is good.
But when I'd look up and see an X, it meant I had a 20% chance of getting an electric shock. Now, not until I got one did I realize that it hurt like hell. It was such a painful shock.
And what did they tell you it was going to feel like?
Well, I didn't know what it was going to feel like. And then once I did, what happened is they weren't looking at what my brain did when I got the shock, because basically my head was moving around as my leg bounced up and down. what they wanted to do was look at the anticipation. What happened in the kind of the threat parts of my brain, my fight or flight part, the amygdala. What would happen when I thought I might get a shock? And they did it in 3 conditions. One is when I was alone. The other one, I was holding a stranger's hand, one of the engineers. And then the third one, I was holding my friend Cherie's hand. And what was astonishing when they got the results is that when I was alone and facing the shock, or even holding the stranger's hand and facing the shock, my brain went nuts. It was like, run, right? I had to get me out of here before the shock comes. But when I was holding Cherie's hand, they found my threat centers were completely quiet and calm. And the reason is that with friends, you offload your stress. You offload the threat. And it doesn't have to be, visceral like this, but it can be, I talk to my friend Jody when I'm stressed out about a story I'm working on, because she's an ABC News producer. Mm-hmm. She understands the stress of stories and deadlines, and we will talk it through, and I offload my stress to Jody. The way Jim Cohn, I love this analogy, the way Jim Cohn at UVA explained it is he said, say 10,000 years ago, one of your ancestors is out hunting in a field, and he comes across, he sees a bear off in the distance, and the bear sees him. And if he's alone, his brain is going run, fight or flight, basically. Say, okay, that's fine. Say he's out looking for, out hunting, and he sees someone from a neighboring tribe whom he doesn't know. His brain is a little calmer, and it's still going run, but he no longer has to outrun the bear. He only has to outrun the other guy, right? Because the bear will get the other guy. But say he's out with his hunting buddy, right? And he sees the bear, and suddenly it's a whole new ball game. The bear isn't a threat. The bear is dinner, right? It changes everything. When you are with a friend, threats dissipate. They lose their impact on you, and it becomes a whole different ballgame. And we see this biologically. Friends are really, really important. It's extraordinary. It was an extraordinary lesson for me to learn.
Isn't it cool how we're wired?
I know. I know, because, the thing is, what's really cool about this, I talked to an expert on this, John Cacioppo, in Chicago. What's really cool is our body tells us when we're threatened, like when we're on the periphery. It's dangerous on the periphery, right? And if you're a fish swimming in a school of fish, you don't want to be the guy on the outside, because they're the easiest to catch. It's not that they're weaker or slower, it's just they're easier to isolate and catch. Isolation is really bad. Isolation, when we feel isolated, we actually feel it emotionally and physically. We don't sleep as well. We have more stress. We wake up a lot more during the night. And that is our body saying, get off of the periphery, get into the warm center of the herd. You can't stay here because it's dangerous to be alone. This is how this is how we're wired. We're not supposed to be alone. We're not supposed to be isolated. Being isolated is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 15 cigarettes a day.
So going from smoking 15 cigarettes a day, going from there, let's go all the way back. There was Harvard study. Actually, let's go to the study of people who went a long time ago. I think it was World War II. People who went from privates to majors because they were not doing it the "I will take this alone" method, were they?
Right. No, this was a Harvard study that's actually the longest still going longitudinal study, where they looked at Harvard sophomores from the years 1939, 40, 41, 42. And what was interesting was that they could see who would succeed during World War II, right? These kids got recruited. They went to World War II. They went into, to Europe or wherever, Japan or wherever, and the Pacific. And who would succeed and who wouldn't succeed? Mm-hmm. So the question was, is it people who are stronger? Is it people who are wealthier? Because a lot of the Harvard kids were there on scholarship. Is it kids, who had, psychologically they were more robust? No, turns out the kids who did the best were those who had warm family relationships. So And the reason they did best is because if they had someone who had invested in them as children, they were better able to invest in their men. And so those were the ones who went through the ranks, who succeeded. The people who were happier were the ones who developed warm relationships. And this was true. They found this to be the case right through the age of 90. The successful, they called it, the decathlon of flourishing. They could look back and say, okay, these people have been in this study for the last 60, 70 years or whatever. What are the attributes? What do these people have in common? We've been studying them all this time, psychologically, cognitively, physically. What do these people have in common who have flourished? And the thing that they had in common is they had found love. They had given love and received love, and those were the people who were flourishing at the end of the line. It was really cool.
Woohoo! So going from there, let's talk briefly about the brain. And I found this section fascinating, as I was a little bit brain foggy when we were suffering from mold conditions in Maui, which we talked about off air or before the show, and I have to feel now with this show, and I mentioned I'm reading a literal book a day. I'm the sharpest at 45, and I've got a couple master's degrees. I've done that whole game. I'm the sharpest now today that I've ever been.
Isn't that incredible? It's because you're learning new things. You are challenging your mind every single day. You're exercising. That's really, really good that's kind of a silver bullet. It is a magic pill. Exercise is a magic pill for your brain, right? But also, people who challenge their brain, who, and I'm not talking about doing crossword puzzles. In fact, no one recommends crossword puzzles, because if you're good at crossword puzzles, you're just using the same brain systems, and you're not really challenging your brain, and you're not keeping new brain cells alive in your hippocampus and all of that. If you're bad at crossword puzzles, you may challenge your brain, but you're not going to do it because you hate doing them, so you'll drop it, right? So you have to find out what it is that you love to do that's also challenging. For some people, it can be things like learning Spanish. I remember talking to one woman who had always wanted to learn Spanish so that she could not just learn Spanish, but have new adventures and go, every year down to, I'm trying to think where it was. I think it was Haiti. She would go every year down to South America, and she could navigate on her own at 65 because she had learned Spanish. And so the Spanish had an end to it. It was not only giving her, doing what learning any language does for you. It really, really sharpens your brain. But also there was a purpose to it. And the purpose brought her into contact with new people. It got her a whole new set of friends where she lived here in the United States. It gave her new adventures. All of that stuff is really good for the brain. So it's not just doing brain games. It's actually living life more fully. And if you can figure out a hobby, reading a book a day, and then interviewing someone, you're not just reading, you're interviewing too. What you're doing is so perfect for your brain, because you're not only reading it, you're also kind of thinking about what are the interesting questions. How can I kind of draw this point together and this point together and create a narrative arc in the way I do the interview, right? Like, you're thinking really hard and in a novel way every time you do an interview.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point you're making, and having that meaning behind it. If you do the crossword and maybe your family depended on it, you're going to get really good, and it's going to recruit other parts of your brain to do it. Right.
That's absolutely right. If there's a purpose to it, because not only would you be doing the crossword for your brain, you'd also be doing it. You'd also be increasing your interaction with your family. You would also feel that you were doing something purposeful. It'd be generative. You're giving away. You're using this crossword puzzle as a means to give away of yourself, right? There's a lot there.
So I was fascinated in this, if you can share for just a moment, how much our brains can improve as we're getting older. And you were really challenged on this one, weren't you?
Yeah. Oh, I am so bad, Michael, at standardized tests. I hate standardized tests. I've always hated them. And what I decided to do is I decided to do this experiment with these two neuroscientists who are really changing our view of cognition and whether you can actually get smarter. Okay, so there's two types of intelligence. There's fluid intelligence, the kind of Sherlock Holmes, often genetic. You're born with it, solving novel problems, being really fast. That is fluid intelligence. That kind of begins to go downhill after around age 30. But then you have crystallized intelligence. And crystallized intelligence is all the stuff that you scoop up living every day. It's what you read. It's your vocabulary. It's emotional intelligence, where you learn to navigate, a tricky situation. It's expertise. It's being the surgeon who's seen this before. It's pattern recognition. All of this stuff is crystallized intelligence. Crystallized intelligence goes up right into your 70s. And those are just averages. I mean, for an individual, it can be, my mom's crystallized intelligence. She's a 95 and she's still learning stuff. So the point is that my question was, could I become smarter? Mm-hmm. Could I, increase my intelligence? And what I knew is that crystallized intelligence will continue to increase as long as I'm challenging my brain. The question was, can I increase my fluid intelligence? And so I did these tests every day where I did this unbelievably painful brain training game called the NBAC, where you had to remember, have I seen that square or that seashell or that castle, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, times ago. It was unbelievably hard. It was agony, and I do it 20 minutes every day for a month. And I took tests at the beginning, then I did the month of training, and then I took tests at the end. And guess what? My fluid intelligence, my working memory, these tests that I took, I improved like 75% on one of the most important tests of fluid intelligence. I mean, they were astonished. They said, too bad you're a study of one, because we'd love to publish this. Here's the thing, though. They're finding this all over. I mean, these researchers are finding, more and more researchers are finding that no matter what your age, if you do brain training, you can increase your fluid intelligence. Now, here's the thing. You need to keep challenging your brain in order to make sure those gains don't go away. That's the thing. I'm unwilling to do that brain training game because it was like pulling out my fingernails, every single day. But I am very keen on challenging my brain more and more, because I can increase both my fluid intelligence and my crystallized intelligence. And that's what you're doing. So
that kind of brings us full circle. And then I really want to dive into the spiritual side of things, but it's making me think of your bike racing now. Because your bike racing isn't just challenging, particularly we were talking on air, you learning how to draft. This is a mental skill that you're having to pick up now.
Yes. It's actually, what it is? It's a skill. It's also conquering fear. And when you hit midlife, you're pretty good. You've kind of mastered a lot of things, and you pretty much do what you're good at. And unless something really terrible happens, have an accident or a bad diagnosis, cancer diagnosis, that kind of thing. Generally, we don't experience a lot of fear in midlife. I like giving talks. I don't really get scared. I get butterflies before the talks, but it isn't a terrifying experience. Drafting is a terrifying experience.
I'm sorry.
It really well, and if you've grown up doing it.
So maybe we should even explain what drafting is for people who may not be familiar with it. So it's when you're doing so much less work. The person in front of you is breaking the wind if you're snuck up right behind them on the bicycle. So it's like half the amount of work if you're a foot away. It's even less if you're willing to get closer than that, which is craziness. But you have to put yourself where if they hit their brakes hard, there isn't a thing you can do about it.
That's right. It's really, you're really counting on the other person. That's why, my friend Mary, who's a really good bike racer, says that you just have to pick the good wheel. You got to pick someone who knows what he's doing, who will point out holes, like who would, in a race they may not be doing that, but you have to get someone that you can trust, who looks like he or she is really, really solid. But it is terrifying. It's terrifying for someone who began biking, in my 40s. No, my 50s. So it's a hard skill to master, because I have a lot of fear to overcome. And plus, I began biking and then I immediately fell off and broke my collarbone. So So I have that.
That was
too.
the brand new Giant Envy.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I had to own the bike like 10 days, and I hit a pothole and do the rookie, put my hand out to break my fall and snap my collarbone. But the biking is not only good because it exercise is unbelievably good for your brain. All sorts of studies show that, both animal and human studies. But also, it's giving me a whole new set of friends that I've made, so there's that. Plus, I'm having to overcome fear. Plus, I'm having to learn strategy and a new skill in terms of biking. So it's, you think, oh, yeah, Barb just goes out biking. It's much more than that. It's a life choice that is making me younger.
Woohoo! I love it. All right, so we talked about this off the air. I can see it so clearly. I have to go there. There's a chapter in your book that didn't make it into your book, right. and I would argue, as have others, that it's there. When you talk about any of these pieces, you light up. You light up so brilliantly, and it leads me to the fact that there's a lot more going on that meets the eye when we're hitting middle age, when we're going through these changes. There's a spiritual component to all of this.
I absolutely believe it. And there's a spiritual, I found this, I don't meditate very well. I wish I did. My mind is like a monkey, swinging from tree to tree limb to tree limb. But I did learn when I have this problem with my throat. I have a partially paralyzed vocal cord, which created chronic pain. And I found that the way I thought about the pain, the way I meditated, I actually talked to meditators about this and placebo researchers. When I could essentially strip away the emotional component of the pain and just say, okay, you know what? Yeah, my vocal cord is really unhappy right now. It's firing and it shouldn't be firing, and it's creating all sorts of issues. But when I could strip away the emotional part where I go, oh my gosh, am I going to lose my voice? Oh, the pain is going to be really bad. Oh, but if I take a pill, then I'm going to be really sleepy. Oh my gosh. When I could take that away, kind of breathe deeply, meditate on the fact that actually thinking changes your brain function, which is just astonishing to me, that pain is very susceptible to thought. When I could calm myself down, strip away the emotional component, and then do something positive, distraction works really well with pain. I'd do an interview, I'd transcribe an interview, I'd take my dog for a walk, whatever it might be. I found that my pain levels in my throat went from requiring, I don't take pain pills per se, but like Neurontin and things to kind of calm it down. I went from 24 pills a day to 3. Just through thought, reducing my stress and all of that. So that is just one tiny bit of the kind of the spiritual side. I have always had a spiritual side to me. It's not something that I wrote a book about it because I was interested in the science of spirituality. What could you believe? I have these kind of beliefs that there is more than this material world. Is that just craziness? What does science have to say about it? So I wrote a whole book, talk about OCD here,
Yay.
I have to write a whole book
and
about
we
this.
benefit from it, so.
But I have a spiritual side, and what it does for me, people are all different. I have a huge amount of respect for every different faith and no faith. I have a huge respect for people who are atheists, who have thought through the issues and decided, there's nothing more. I have a huge respect for anyone who kind of gives this some thought. But I personally am a Christian, and so what I tend to do is kind of Jesuit Ignatian prayer and meditation. Beautiful. And imagination. And where I will read some scripture and then I'll put myself in it, and all sorts of stuff happens.
You're a mystic.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Sometimes it's funny stuff, and sometimes it's really profound, and sometimes, sometimes it's just plain boring, and you go, okay, that wasn't so great. But the fact of sitting down and spending time quietly, something's going on underneath. Something's going on under the surface. You may go out and you may do a bike ride or a run that just doesn't feel that good. But you know what? Something is going on such that if you didn't do, you're better off than if you didn't do it, right? So my view is that I have this kind of spiritual component that I feel is really, really important. And what it does for me is it gives me perspective. So it makes me realize a couple things. One is that I am not the center of the universe, that I am a part of a larger universe, that quantum mechanics is big. I am part of this fabric of reality, and how I think and how I act actually affects the fabric of reality. So if I'm in a bad mood, it can ruin my husband's day, and that can ruin someone else's day or whatever. And if I am meditative, thoughtful, generous, because it comes from this well of kind of this perspective, that can make people's lives better too. And it certainly makes my life better. The other thing it does for me, and this is not true of all religions, but for me, if I think that there is a reality that's different from this, chair I'm sitting in and this microphone that I've got on, if I think that there may be something that transcends time, then the stuff that I do now, I think maybe matters for eternity. So it may not work out well for me in the short term, whatever that decision is. Something may kind of really suck in the short term, right? But in the long term, the way I respond to it is really, really important. And if I respond with a kind of an eye on the long game, it's going to be a very different response than if I'm responding in the moment to something. So it helps me out. I wish I were better at it. I wish I spent more time at it. I wish I were a calmer person. But, we do what we can, and it's really important for me.
Well, and that last thing you said, that's the law of karma.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
So, wow, there's so many beautiful things that you just shared right there. Think about it. As you're getting older, if you think about this and you realize or believe, because I'm open to all belief systems as well, that there may be more, it really does change. It means that you can keep feeding yourself to the last day.
Absolutely. And one of the things it tells you is my role as, if I am 70, my role is a different role than when I am 40, right? My role is to give back to the next generation. My role is to invest. And that's actually a bit of immortality, right? Because if I am helping my stepdaughter, if I'm, helping her think about character issues or what happens when this, if I help her develop her own set of kind of moral principles or whatever, if I help in this, that's going to go not only to her, but to her children and to their children. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
There's an immortality to investing outward and downward. And so it's no longer just about me. It's about eternity.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Something that you said reminds me, I'm writing an article about mid-faith crisis. And simply because I think the faith journey often, there's kind of, it follows the same curve as the psychological U curve.
That makes sense.
And
at that low point, you're going, what are you doing for me, God?
Right, exactly. And so I was talking to this one guy about what has he ever had this kind of, not even a crisis, but boredom, ennui, which is more similar to what most people don't have a midlife crisis where they go out and dump their wife and get a sports car. Most people just have this kind of malaise, right? It just feels hard. And I think that's what most people go through in their spiritual practices if they're committed to them. They're not always, exciting, and there's the honeymoon's over and, all of that. So I was talking to this one guy and I said, so, have you had this kind of ennui? And he goes, yeah. And I was trying to figure out what to do about it. And I'd try to read another book, or I'd try, I'm terrible at contemplative meditation and contemplation and all of this. And he said, so I was talking to a friend about it, who's actually the pastor of his church. And he said, and his friend said, well, what is your relationship like with your wife? Like, do you enjoy her when you're staring into each other's eyes, or, going on long walks together? And he goes, no, I enjoy Laura when we're like working in the yard together, or we kind of rebuild a cabin together, or we have our kids and we do stuff. And the pastor said, why would you think that your relationship with God, or however you want to say it, but with God would be any different? And what he realized is that he finds his spiritual rich point in his work. He loves the work that he does. He does good work. He works for a nonprofit. He's helping people. This is where he finds his spiritual practice. Just as you're saying, you find your meditation out biking. We think, oh, I have to sit there and I have to sit there for 45 minutes, or I need to read another spiritual book. Maybe that's not the way to go. Maybe you find your spiritual, peace and quiet when you've got your hands in the dirt and you're gardening, or when you're out on a bike, or when you are helping a friend. I mean, maybe that's where God appears, or whoever appears in your life. Maybe that's where the transcendent breaks through. And that's what you're saying about your biking.
When is the article coming out? I need to read it.
I think it's coming out in November, and I will send you a copy of it, okay?
Thank you. That was put more beautifully than I ever could have put it. So just a few more wrap-up questions. We could continue this interview for everybody. Get Life Reimagined. You are going to have so much fun. Just don't do what I do and try to go through it in a day, please. I beg of you. So with that said, a few quick wrap-up questions. Yes. The first is, now that you have Vivian in your life, although she's headed out here shortly, what advice would you give to parents today, or maybe for parents raising kids today?
Right. Well, I'm not the expert on that, right? I really am not. I mean, she lived in a different city until she came to college 4 years ago, and so we've seen her a lot since then. So I can give a perspective of a step parent.
Please.
Okay, is that if that's all right? So I was very conscious of not being her mother, but I was also conscious of, and I have a great relationship with her mother. I adore her mother. Devin and Wendy are great friends, so that makes it really easy. I was also conscious of thinking about where could I contribute to Vivian in a way that her mother might not have the opportunity. So we're here in Washington, and
that's very mindful, that to be able to step back and look at that
and say, okay, how can I don't want to step on her mom's toes. I want to give her all the love I can. And that affection is, you can't have too much of that. But how can I contribute in a way that maybe someone in Champaign, Illinois can't contribute? And, that may be from a work perspective. It may be, I'm in DC, and I have a lot of contacts through journalism and things like that. So maybe I can help her think through work issues, or just as her dad does. And so I'm very conscious of both being affectionate, trying to be selfless, which is something, if you've never had a child, suddenly you have to think about someone else first, and that's harder to do if there's not a biological bond. You have to actually train yourself to do it, right? So how do you do that? And then how can I contribute in a way that only I can? That's my unique gift to her. What is that? And so that would be my advice.
Woo! Thank you. So going from there, a question we like to ask all of our guests a little before the end is, what personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
Oh my gosh, there's...
You can hit us with a bunch.
Okay. Well, one of them, to tell you the truth, one of them is my cycling, and that's partly because I feel great physically, but I've developed all these new friendships. I was out this morning at 6 a.m. on Haynes Point, going around and around with, doing intervals with a friend, and she's become a really good friend. So there's something about, and there's a group of women I bike with, and there's something really fun about being in shape, having new friendships. How often do we get new friendships when we're middle-aged? How often does that happen? It doesn't happen. You have to work at it. So I'm kind of really blessed that I have that. But the other thing that is really important to me is I'm going through this really scary journey right now, where I've been employed by a news organization for 35 years, either the Christian Science Monitor or National Public Radio. And now I am having to think about myself as contributing my own little, I don't like the word brand, but my own little kind of entity. Mm-hmm. And how can I contribute? And it's harder, and it's psychologically it's harder. It's much more rewarding because actually I can do the things that I think are really important. So for example, if you're a news reporter, I love NPR. Yet you still have to do stories that you think, well, okay, I really would rather not have to do that story, but I have to do that story because they employ me, right? I'm supposed to do this. We need to get this on the air. Now I get to think, what are the things that are really, really important? What do I think people need to care about? And how do I do that? How do I make people care? And what's really cool for me, and this is kind of coupled with this scary time of venturing forth, is that I have a husband who is unbelievably supportive. He really believes in me. When I kind of wring my hands and go, woe is me, I don't have a deadline today, what am I going to do? He's like, Barb, you just wrote a book. You created something out of nothing. You are going to do something really exciting. This is what it's all about. I am here to help you reimagine your life, essentially. And I am really, really lucky. And so one of the I'm lucky that I'm reimagining my life. But let me tell you one of the things that was so cool that I just loved. And when you get up, you say, what do you really love? Last summer when I was rewriting, I'd written the first bad draft of my book, and my editor sent back my all of his ideas and things like that. And my husband, who's a college professor, has much more flexibility in the summer. And every day, he's a beautiful writer, and he's a very shrewd editor. And every day we would go to the public library in McLean, Virginia. We'd drive out together, and he was writing his own papers for a journal article and stuff like that. But I would go through and I'd make these massive changes in my chapters. And when I'd be done, we'd go home, I'd print it out, and I'd hand it to him. And the next day, he would go and he would edit my new chapter. And we spent kind of the better part of 6 weeks going to the library every day, working on our stuff, him editing my book. And it was like it was this joint project, and it was really, really happy. It's kind of an unusual venture, but we had this together. And that's why, like with this book, yeah, I wrote it kind of, but he was huge in the shaping of it, in the ideas, in the polishing. He was huge. And so one thing that really kind of makes me excited is that, I've got someone in my life who really believes in me.
You are blessed and incredibly lucky, and it's making me think of the section in the book on how you guys met. This was divine.
It was Match.com.
And that too, Naughty Harmony. That's another story.
Right. No, it was funny. What was really funny about it is I was covering the Justice Department for NPR at the time, and it was right after 9/11. So I was working. I'd get in every morning at 4 a.m. and I'd leave every night at 10 p.m. after the last feed of All Things Considered. And that went on for 5 months. And in the middle of this, a friend of mine, my best friend at NPR, her boyfriend, whom she had met on Match, and they're now married, basically her boyfriend cornered me and said, you need to go on Match because I can't bear to see you go on any more blind dates. And I'm like, I don't have time for this. But I signed up, and I would look at the, I couldn't look at it during the week because I was too busy. But on Saturday mornings, I'd log on, and there'd be like all these emails. And it was actually really encouraging that there were all these kind of cool men out there that I didn't know. And they were out there, and it was encouraging. And, but I had pretty high standards. And so basically, I'd get like I'd go through 200 emails at a time, and I'd have this cut and paste where I'd say, dear so-and-so, you look like a wonderful person, but I don't think it's a match. Good luck to you. And then I'd, cut and paste.
That was very kind of you.
Head invites, right? I just felt they deserved an answer since they had written me. And then, about 3 weeks into it, I get this email that all the punctuation and spelling was correct. And that was really important. It was beautifully written, and it was charming. And I'm like, oh, nuts. I probably have to go out with this guy. And, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, I'll go. And so I wrote him back. And we ended up not meeting for another few weeks because he was in Baltimore. His expertise is on security in South Asia. So think Afghanistan, India, Pakistan. This is right after 9/11, right? And then there's, and I'm busy. And we finally met. And by the time we met, what was really cool about this is a longer story than you wanted, but what was really cool is that we had this like Victorian old-fashioned romance because we hadn't really spoken, we hadn't met, but we had been writing these really elegant emails to each other. They were like, these really formal letters. And by the time we met and it was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. No more match. That's it. I've met my guy. And he felt the same way.
Woohoo! And you guys stuck with each other through the RV trip.
Yes. Absolutely. Blackwater.
Very cool. So before I let you go here, where can people go to find out more? Yes, Blackwater. If you ever drive an RV, you'll know what she means. And why you do not want to use the toilet on the RV.
That's so true. We tried for a long time. So there are a couple of places you can go.
Yep.
One is I have a website, BarbaraBradleyHagerty.com. Mm-hmm. One G in Hagerty. Although I think I've got the website for both spellings simply because, people spell it. Or you can just go on to Amazon. But my website has a description of the book and also the previous book I wrote, my 6-part series on NPR, a few other things. So if they just people want to dip into it and see if it's for them, they'll probably get a sense for that just by going to the website.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And if you didn't catch that, if you're driving down the road, go to inspiranationshow.com. We'll have the links to get you over to Barb as well. So before I let you go, any last words of wisdom you want to share with people?
Midlife is a terrific time. So is older age. So is younger age. But here's what's important. The decisions you make now actually matter for the duration. And that's why it's really important to kind of choose meaning over happiness and to engage in your life in those things that are really important to you. If you engage, if you live purposefully, you're going to have a good end of your life as well as middle of your life.
Woohoo! Well, thank you so much, Barb. This has been a lot of fun. The book is beautiful. I'm going to be recommending it obviously to Jessica, to my parents, to man on the street. Hey, you need to read Life Reimagined. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been really fun, Michael.
For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get life reimagined, choose meaning and purpose in your life, and engage and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you.
That was really fun. You're really good at this.
Yay. Thank you. Coming from you, that means a lot.
No, you're really, really good at this. I had a really good time.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspiranationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!